Hello again, everyone. Edwin Learnard back once again. In this YouTube astrological segment, I'm going to be talking about the transit of Jupiter in Aquarius from 2020 to 2021. It's going transit. Jupiter will enter Aquarius on December 19, 2020. Will stay there until December 29, 2020, but there's going to be an exception when it's going to traverse the zodiac sign Pisces from May 13, 2021 to July 28, 2021, with the exception of that period that transit Jupiter will be in the sign of Aquarius. And I'm actually looking forward to this. It's going to exit Capricorn, transition out of more pessimistic, depressing Capricorn, and go into the zodiac sign Aquarius. Of course, when Jupiter was in Capricorn, it was in the sign of restriction and limitations, and also really it doesn't mean it was also in its fall, of course, being in Capricorn. But the thing about this is that when we look at this. I understand Jupiter in Aquarius. By no means, I know it's not in its exaltation. It's not in its, at least my understanding, it's not in its exaltation. It's not in, uh, in its dignity. But the thing about it is, it's still, I see it as a much better place for Jupiter than Capricorn. It's going to be very fortuitous for hope and optimism in one's future at this time. And I think when you're talking about this in the United States, the coronavirus, it's going to be more positive for that, especially. It's going to be about a lot more collective efforts and expansion of selflessness, consideration for others, which we didn't necessarily have as much before when Jupiter, during the time that Jupiter is in Capricorn. Capricorn is very self-protective. It's more about their own interests, doing what's good for them, and it's not so much about other people. And I think the fact that you're going to have this transit Jupiter in Aquarius, it's going to be more about people just collectively joining together for the good of humanity, and that can include, I would say, dealing with the coronavirus pandemic. It's going to be a time where you're going to have where unorthodox things may be more accepted, whether it's unorthodox religions or beliefs that might be unconventional. We might even see some sports out there that are going to be really completely new and different that we had not seen previously. Remember, Jupiter can be associated with sports. Aquarius is really, it's very unorthodox, unique, and original. We maybe will see some teams being added to the major, more teams added to the major sports. For all we know, it's a possibility. It definitely increases that propensity with Jupiter being in Aquarius. And it's also, I could see a very strong proliferation at this time. Really autonomous driven cars, the self-driving ones, even maybe bionics, robotics, even. And remember that your Aquarius is ruled by Uranus, which is connected with the nerves. We might see some advancements in nerve conduction tests, anything that can be related to the nerves at this time. It can be, this could be a transit that could be very auspicious for innovation, for bionics, for friendships, social reform, more about freedom and independence. If you were in a limiting situation, remember again, it is transitioning from Capricorn to Aquarius. So even though I'm not saying Jupiter in Capricorn was all negative or all bad, I mean, Jupiter is about luck and fortune. So there's luck and fortune during that time when Jupiter was in Capricorn for people that may have been in the government or people that were accountants, that were in dentistry, or doing their own business. Anything masonry, anything that was Capricorn related, it could have been very fortuitous for business acumen in general. But at the same time, Jupiter in Capricorn could have been. I see this as it could have been an expansion, enlargement of just more despondent energy, restrictions and limitations. Now it'll be going into freedom related Aquarius. So this could be a time where people are going to be more about going out more and social networking, increasing one's friendships, and also for goals, aspirations, the future, being progressive in general. And even going back to innovation, it could also be a very good time to, I mean, you're looking at this transit. It could affect all collectively, but especially those that have an Aquarius sun, moon, or ascendant, because of course it is going to be in their sign. Now, if it's the sun in Aquarius, it could be for one's basic wants, whether it's expressing ingenuity, friendships, attaining goals, aspirations, freedom-related matters, doing things that are just simply unorthodox or unusual. And the moon is more about the emotional needs. But remember, when you have this transit, especially when when it makes a conjunction to one's moon, sun, or ascendant, could be very intensified. When this hits one's ascendant, remember, could also increase as far as the weight because of the person, the physical body, especially. I mean, you're talking about, I mean, Jupiter, I've talked about it before, and I'll say it again, that Jupiter, even though it's very benign and benevolent, it can be very paradoxical. It also has a tendency to enlarge and expand. And you have Jupiter hitting the center of the physical body, that can enlarge and expand the physical body. Could be a time where people may have more of a propensity to gain weight. And being an Aquarius, it could happen very spontaneously, very unexpectedly. It might be more weight that you would think in a certain time that would be considered normal, or it could be through some kind of unusual diet. It can be some kind of diet that might be very unique or unusual. This is also, but again, the fact that if you have this transit and when it makes a conjunction to one sun, moon, or ascendant, this will be very intensified. It can be very fortuitous for those matters connected with the sun, moon, ascendant in the zodiac sign Aquarius. If this is hitting one's ascendant, and even during the time it's traversing the first house of a person, it could be very good for Aquarius new beginnings, whether it might be something that might be connected with aeronautics, astronomy, aerospace, even rocket science, innovation, computers, electronics, anything that could be humanitarianism, anything that could be um, Aquarius related. And the thing about this too, this will also this is going to be a time too, and again, going back to the fact that this can enlarge and expand issues. It can expand and enlarge issues connected, looking negatively on rebelliousness, radical behavior, anarchy, doing the unusual, whether it could be riding a unicycle with a board on your head. It could be people doing things that maybe they wouldn't necessarily have done before. Some of you may have known, I don't know if I'm saying his name right, Nick Wendella. He was a person, I think he was the tightrope over the Grand Canyon with no netting. This is going to be a time where a lot of people may do things that they felt inhibited before doing. They felt prohibited, and this is a time, I would say, where many people will go out on that limb and do these things, even if there was some precautions, or they were being overly prudent. They're saying, well, no, I don't want to do that. That's too risky. This is going to be a time where a lot of that fear and apprehension will be put to the side. Again, not to be redundant with this, but going back to the fact that Jupiter will be transitioning out of limiting Capricorn and going into futuristic, progressive Aquarius. Now, some other things I mean to look at as far as this goes. Now, this is also going to be a time I mean, some of you may have heard there was something about a, hold on a moment, people. I was going to say, there was something that somebody had made, a company, I think it may have been Microsoft, that was going to make the super environmental computer, and it was going to kind of keep track of the world's ecological state, I guess the environmental state, as far as I don't know the full details and nuances of it, but maybe matters like with pollution and what people and kind of keep a gauge on what needs to be done at a given time, perhaps to improve the environment. But I think we're going to see things, maybe a proliferation of things like this during this time that we may have even our own neighborhoods and communities. This is also a period too where I could also see where you're going to be talking about maybe even a proliferation of supercomputers. Remember, Jupiter is about enlargement, things that can be prodigious and large. Aquarius is associated with computers. We might also, I could really envision having more people taking more college courses over the internet, especially with the fear of the coronavirus still going around. It's interesting too when I look at this timeline, the fact that this is going to start on December 19th, 2020. It's going to be about a month before the inauguration of Joe Biden, and it's going to end almost at the end of 2000, 2021. It's interesting because I've speculated, and a lot of other people will concur, that this coronavirus is going to, it'll get to a point where it'll dissipate enough where people can feel more of a life of normalcy by the end of 2021, where we can actually maybe go around and not be overly guarded or cautious and prudent and thinking, well, I got to take all these precautions with the visor and wearing the surgical mask, etc. And some people might even wear goggles. I've even worn them from time to time. And I think this is a period where we're going to really again be working, a lot of us together, and being progressive, forward moving, looking for having a lot of hope and optimism for one's future. Now, this is also it's important to look at the house this falls in, as this can, of course, can impact the delineation and interpretation. Now, mine is going to be in the 10th house for most of the transit, because I have 1 degree Aquarius on my 10th house cusp, and I have 27 degrees Aquarius on my 11th. So very good part of the transit. It will be in my 10th house, and it can be, of course, very auspicious for career-related matters if I decide to do something really more career-related in terms of the astrology. Jupiter, of course, is about being very fortuitous and fortunate. Aquarius is associated with astrology in the 10th house, of course, connected with one's career. And also, it's important to look at aspects to points in the chart, in your own chart, as of course that could impact the delineation and interpretation. Now, mine is going to trine my natal Uranus from like December 31st, 2020 to January 13th, 2021. So it's going to last almost 2 weeks. I mean, that could be very auspicious, which is Jupiter, of course, very beneficial for prosperity, which is Jupiter, maybe something astrological as far as that's Aquarius in the career, but that could be aided with the fact that it's going to be trining my Uranus in the 6th house. Could really work well with maybe my internet connections in my day-to-day routine. Internet, the fact that especially it's in my Uranus is in Libra, internet relationships in the day-to-day routine, and also Uranus and in the 6th house, of course, could indicate astrology in the day-to-day routine. So it's really, that could be a very good transit for me during the time that actually transpires. Now, another thing too is that keep in mind is that this is going to be mean, let's say, as far as health-related issues go, if you have this in, say, if it falls in your first or sixth house, especially, this could be an enlargement of some kind of Aquarius, of physical related issues. It could be something like with the nerves, the calves, the ankles, the shins, circulation. It could be something of an unusual health related nature. Some of you may have heard of I don't know if I'm saying it right, hemiparesis. It's when half the body basically is paralyzed or it's immobilized. I had a friend of mine that had she had a 29 degrees Aquarius sun, which of course is the anaritic crisis degree. The sun can be associated with the physical body to some degree. I understand the ascendant is what dominates the appearance and physical issues, but the sun can also play a role, can be prominent in physical related matters. Maybe, I'd say not as much as the ascendant on average, but the sun can play a role in it. She'll of course have that transit when at the tail end of the Jupiter and Aquarius transit as you go into the latter part of December of 2021. She has I believe it's hemiparesis, because she had half of her body was basically, paralyzed, immobilized, or what have you. So it's something to look at if you have, when this is actually, hitting either the first or sixth house, or even your sun or your ascendant, because the sun, of course, can be connected with the physical body to some degree. The ascendant is the dominant, as far as the dominant astrological proponent as far as the physical body goes. And the thing about this is to looking at this as well. Some other things I may see with this, how this may manifest this transit. We may have maybe astrology might be accepted in more colleges, because remember, Jupiter is associated with higher education, and Aquarius is associated with astrology. Jupiter is also about publishing, so we might see more publishing of things that are Aquarius related, whether it's things with science fiction. It can be, the unusual in general, things with computers, electronics, innovations, astrology, astronomy, aerospace, anything that is related to the zodiac sign Aquarius. So, and the thing is to looking at this, I don't know if I stated this before about being, I talked a little bit about that this transit. I mean, Jupiter could be very paradoxical, and even though it's very benign and benevolent, it can also expand. In some cases, it might expand some idiosyncratic behavior from others and some bizarre, unorthodox, unusual energy from people as well. And I would say Aquarius, another thing I want to talk about before I head out is that, sadly, I mean, Aquarius I see is the sign, being associated with epilepsy. So this could be, I mean, because remember, you're talking about, epilepsy is associated with an electrical imbalance. Aquarius is associated with a lack of electrical equilibrium. Aquarius is about electricity. This is something where you might see more, might be more prevalence of people that have, that have epilepsy, and also what I talked about before, with the other health-related issues. People, you might see more prevalence, people having issues with the ankles, the shins, the circulation, problems with the nerves, neurological matters. So anyway, people, that will conclude this YouTube astrological segment. Until next time, people, Edwin Learnard saying stay well.